Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to use a line that I've heard many times, and that is there is no volume solution to an intensity problem. Now, when I say this, I am not endorsing Mike Menzer's level of extremely low volumes of training. So let's be very clear on that. I am not doing that. I am advocating for people to have relatively sane volumes and train hard. And the point is, there's a lot of flaws on a lot of these studies and the data and stuff that people are bringing forward these days. We're seeing a very specific circle in the research and evidence-based world pushing ridiculous volumes as a solution, as if this is going to be the magic key. And I think the problem with that is that they're essentially marketing to a group of people who just don't train hard. And quite frankly, some of these influencers I've seen who endorse some of this, I've seen their training, and I know people who have trained with them. And quite frankly, I'm not going to call out the person who called at least one of them out on it to me, someone who regularly puts this out. And he's just like, yeah, you're right, dude trains like a pussy. Okay? This is someone who's worked out with him a couple times. Of course, the guy's going to advocate 52 sets, 50 sets, 40 sets a week. Of course he is. But herein lay the problem. Has this ever been required? No, really. Has this ever been required for anyone to get amazing results? And I want people to really and truly think about that, because you look at some of the people who are advocating for this, and at least a couple of them are some of the most beat up, injured, banged up people you see out there. Injury after injury. And I'm talking, I don't mean like, oh, Jason, you've pulled a few things. But every time I have pulled a few things, was my training volumes look like they're usually too high. I'm talking people who've had major catastrophic injuries, numerous ones, multiple ones. I'm talking major back injuries and stuff. Multiple surgeries to repair things. And again, I will state for the record, every minor injury I've had, and the one major one I had, 20 years ago. It's 20, yeah, it's like about to be 20 years ago. Every one of those times, I was in the gym too much. I was training like 6 days a week. The only injury I ever had that required a surgery, like I guess in 2004, I was training like 6 days a week. Okay? I was doing 2 a day sometimes. So let's step back and think about that for a moment. And they're all beat up. And we know that overuse appears to be one of the highest, if not the highest, cause of weight room injuries is flat overuse. Right? And here's the thing. Step back and look at the champions. People are like, but there have been champions on both ends, right? They've been on both extremes. There have been people who are, high volume and then more moderated volume. And there have been top winners and champions and strongest people in the world and Mr. Olympias in both categories. Okay. Therein lay the proof. In other words, the extreme volumes have never been required to be the best in the world. And I don't care whether it's been drug tested, pre-drug era, post-drug era, right? It's never actually been a requirement to be number one. In other words, it's the idea that if your goal is to get to at least 2, you can add 1 and 1 together and get to 2. You don't have to add 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 to get to 2. And it's not a case of more is always better, right? There's an absolute limit. The thing is, a bunch of the earlier data used to show the opposite. Again, this just shows how bad exercise science is. We had all the studies consistently showing when volume started getting higher, gains went down. Not even a diminished return. People were flat gaining less muscle than all these newer studies. It's like, but you go back to the real world. It's never been a requirement. Plenty of people have been extremely jacked, literally world-class bodybuilders, world-class powerlifters, doing sometimes less than 10 sets a week, but that's not the norm. But you think, what, 12, 14, 15, 16 sets a week has produced dozens of champions. And so there's my point with some of this. If these people were able to be the best in the world on this, do people really think that they need to be more extreme than that? And I know people say, well, just because something worked for the genetic elite and lots of drugs doesn't mean, and that is true. And I'm not disagreeing with that point. But my point is, it's when all other factors have been equal. It's not like the people who are doing 40 or 50 sets a week are doing the most winning. They occasionally were the best. But there were just as many, if not more, doing less than 20 sets who were the best. Any given event, year, time. Do people see the point with this? Do they understand how insane this is? We get to a point where people are like, well, I need that much training to keep my sanity. Let that one sink in for a moment. You need to fulfill an exercise addiction that may be causing injuries to keep your sanity. Maybe a point where some good therapy might be warranted in this case. And again, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be training hard. Believe me, I'm telling you guys to train hard. You guys just watched me in this doing a work set, repping out 515 on a beltless deadlift, closing in on 50 years old. I mean, I'm about pretty hard training. But that's my point. If you're training pretty dang hard, you're not going to be able to do huge amounts of volume. You're just not. And if there comes a point where you're just beating your body into the ground, right? There's a point where you were just beating your body into the ground. You're not really making further gains. You're just fixating on an addiction, or you're compensating for, the inability to train hard. And yeah, I think we can define where these thresholds are. I think when we start exceeding about 20 sets a week, we're getting into that category. And again, this is just common sense, practical approach. I'm not saying that's automatically a scientific approach. And I'm also not telling you guys, because people are like, well, they're using that logic, you only do one set. Well, except there's plenty of evidence, anecdote, and in the lab that one set's just not enough. Okay. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.